Okay, I'm Ian Charles of Wizards. I'm here with Geoff Campbell of Philosotech. Geoff, over to you. Tell us a little about who you are, what Philosotech do, how long have you been going, that kind of general background.
Certainly. Okay, Philosotech is a small consultancy. We specialise in performance and availability. So fixing performance problems with software, making sure that systems are 100% available where possible, and testing and making sure that the systems live up to the spec. Okay,
so performance and availability, what do we mean by that? What's that all about?
Rather unusually in IT, it actually means exactly what it says. It's a set of tools and methods for making sure that the systems perform to the specification, so that they're responsive and useful to either customers or users, depending on the target, and that they're available for the time that they're being used. So that obviously covers use of clustering and so on to make sure the systems are up.
Okay, well let's go into that detail slightly more as we move forward. Who are your clients? Who typically uses your services?
Okay, we've got a range of clients, but essentially it's anyone with large software systems. So I'm currently doing work for a couple of large high street banks, some high street retail, a bit of local and national government, and a mortgage company. We have in the past covered more or less every industry sector out there.
Right.
All businesses these days rely on some form of large system at the core. So really, it's any company with computer systems.
Okay, so why do people use you? What's the historical? How have they got to the point where they understand they need your services?
I understand. Testing is a complicated business, and it's a very focused business.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Of course I would. Of course. We have access to a lot of very expensive and useful tools that mean that the tests that we run can be done very quickly, to a very high level of precision. And produce very useful information in weeks rather than months.
Right.
Whereas previously the customer may have needed to have a dedicated person on site and a dedicated set of tools to run the tests over a longer time.
Right. So this is really classical outsourcing, isn't it? Outsourcing of a particular IT issue.
Yeah, exactly so.
Okay. And what do you find when you run these tests? What's the rat's nest that you uncover? Is that a fair question?
I've only ever found a few actual physical rats. There's two approaches we take. The first one is application profiling that we bring to bear when there's an identified problem with software. So we're actually looking for an identified performance problem, and with that we tend to find things like inefficiently written software, so software that's querying databases in a very inefficient way, software that's formatting up very inefficient web pages so they don't work well over slow links, software that's really just not working efficiently with the systems as they're designed, so that we can then give advice on how to write the software better, or how to configure the server processes better to get a better outcome.
Okay, so and how often? How long's your engagement, and how often should a client be working with you?
Okay, this really comes to the second process, which is classical load testing, where we're trying to prove that the system will work to the level required. That really we do with a lot of our customers, we do on something like a quarterly basis. So they'll have a quarterly software release cycle, and we will go in before each release is rolled out, each major release, and we'll run a load test, and we'll document what we think the peak performance of that the system can sustain is, and at what point it breaks down. We quite often test systems to destruction if we're feeling in a particularly fruity mood, and we can document exactly where that point of failure is and how it fails, And if that's below the level that the service level agreement demands, then obviously we can offer advice on how to fix the problems.
So we've got a few options there about. I mean, what you're describing here is a mix of internal and if you like customer facing applications. What's the? I mean, are you actually testing websites? Are you actually looking?
Yes, indeed. Most customers these days, in fact, have web-based systems, whether they're internal or customer facing. It tends to be a web-based application.
Right.
We can actually load test almost anything. I've just finished doing a test for a large recruitment firm, worldwide recruitment firm, that used Citrix to run their applications.
Right.
So rather than testing against a web application, we were testing against the Citrix front end. It's slightly more fiddly to test, but we have all the tools to do that. But in terms of the customer websites, yeah, generally it's the customer facing stuff is a website. And obviously we're then running through use cases to create new customers on there and to do typical customer operations.
Okay. And so, again, you've partly answered this really previously. I mean, but why shouldn't customers do this themselves?
There's no reason why they shouldn't, but it involves having expert knowledge on site, expert people, and some rather expensive tools. You know, we have relationships with the tool vendors. We can get short-term rentals on the tools that aren't available to end customers.
And what about things like? I mean, clearly there are going to be when you come across performance issues, there are clearly going to be conflicts within the client base between the person that manages the database, the person that manages the disaster recovery, the person that manages the storage, and so on. I mean, but how do you manage that? Or how do you deal with the potential political fallout?
This is actually the point of the whole application profiling exercise, is that you will end up with normally a triangle of systems people, software people and management all pointing at one another, right, saying why hasn't this problem been fixed? Well, right. we provide the forensic evidence to show exactly which of the departments needs to fix it.
Is it and which is it usually, or is it a combination of three?
Well, there is a joke internally that whenever we go on site, the first thing we hear is, of course, it's the network.
Right.
In 15 years of doing application profiling, it's been the network precisely once.
Right.
So in most cases, it's a question of reorganising bits of software, either reauthoring some bits or reconfiguring others, so that they're not hitting other bits of software quite so hard.
Gotcha.
We normally find one particular problem is database access.
Right.
I did an application profile some years ago for a delivery management system that was hitting the database 15,000 times for a single purchase order.
Right.
And obviously they had a large group of people entering purchase orders, and so they were getting millions and millions of accesses to the database, except they weren't, because the database couldn't handle it.
Right.
So, you know, a small amount of reauthoring of the software and the problem goes away.
Good. Well, that's a very eloquent summary of application performance and availability. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.